Don't come back until you find food. I'm a freshman at college, and I've been rushing a fraternity while there. Before anyone gets any ideas, most frats in America are not what you hear about on TV. While those certainly do exist, and we even have one or two on my campus, the majority of frats are filled with good and cool guys. One of the things that drove me to the frat is that I felt like they actually wanted me there. I love the sense of companionship and brotherhood that the active members seem to have for one another. So when spring hit, and I was allowed to become a pledge, I did. I was really excited for this, because I knew and liked all the 14 guys who were pledging, 3 of whom were even my closest friends on campus, and I was happy that I get to become brothers in bond with all of them. This fraternity that I pledged with was officially a non-hazing one, although they did let us know going into that there was going to be some light hazing, because in their eyes going through that brought us closer together, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. Every Thursday night, we would participate in things called rituals, which were usually quick things designed to teach us a lesson about what being in a frat meant, and one night I suppose they succeeded. We went down into our basement, all 14 of us, and the actives were waiting for us. One of them stood up. "Pledges, this is probably the most hazing we'll ever do to you," he said. He then proceeded to split us all into groups of 2, and then had us all remove any clothing which linked us to the college or fraternity, as well as put on warm clothing and give up our phones. "We'll be taking you on an adventure, and you will all work with your partner to bring us something to eat. Stick to the roads and you'll be fine, and don't come back until you find something." With that, we all had to put bags on over our heads. 2 active members guided us to cars, and they drove us somewhere. I was trying to mentally map where they were taking us, but they made a lot of unnecessary twists and turns in a clear attempt to confuse us. Eventually, I lost track of where we were, and as they went down a pathway that I was unfamiliar with. After a little while, the car came to a stop. The actives helped me and my partner, a guy named Will, out of the car. They took the cloth bags off of our heads, and we were in the middle of nowhere on a country road, late at night. I turned to the actives, and they had those classic shit-eating smiles on their faces. "You're gonna want to walk down that way," one said while pointing. "And remember, don't come back till you bring us something to eat. And get creative. Don't bring us grass or some shit. And no processed food. Raw ingredients only." With that, they got in their car and drove off. Without much wait, Will and I started walking down the road, looking for anything that could have been edible. My first instinct was dandelions, because I knew from experience that you can turn those into soup. Unfortunately, as it was still early spring, there wasn't much in terms of plant growth outside, especially dandelions. Will and I spent a lot of time of the first part talking and joking around with each other. There weren't any houses for a long while, so we figured we really didn't have to worry about noise. Everything started off great. We figured out early on that the guys that dropped us off would drive down the road every now and then, bathing us in the light of their high beams just to annoy us, and we would always return that kindness by raising our middle fingers. I did appreciate that they were clearly checking on us to make sure we were safe, though. I legitimately didn't feel scared at first, as I was with Will, and the actives were still patrolling the roads to make sure we were going the right direction. To be honest, I was just worried about finding something to eat. That's when we saw our first house, with its lights still on, and I had an idea. "Hey, Will, why don't we just go up to one of those houses and ask them for some sort of raw ingredient?" Will shook his head. "Nah, way, man. I'm not doing that. I'm black. They might misunderstand or something." I didn't understand what Will was saying there. We were in the middle of nowhere, and having 2 teenagers come up to your door in the middle of the night asking for raw ingredients might be misconstrued, especially when one of those teenagers is black in this day and age. I turned to Will and tried to persuade him on this, saying that nothing is really growing around here, so the only thing we could probably bring back is roadkill, and I'd rather risk asking a stranger than lug the bloody, rotting corpse of an animal back for several miles. Eventually, Will seemed to agree, although he insisted on staying out of sight. I jokingly called him a pussy, and we went up to the house. I rang the doorbell once, and not even 10 seconds later, an older man, maybe in his 50s, opened the door. He was balding, a bit thin, and looked like he hadn't showered in days, as cliche as that all sounds. But the thing that really got me was how the creepy fucker was looking at me. He didn't look like he was surprised or irritated to see me at all. Instead, he had this sort of half smile almost, and just stared at me straight in the eyes, never breaking eye contact. "Good evening," he said, in a creepy, somewhat higher-pitched voice. "What brings you here?" I immediately got the sense that we should not have knocked on this guy's door. "I'm sorry," I said. I think I confused your house with someone else's. Sorry to bother you." "Nonsense," the guy said. "Walking down here at night? You must have car troubles. It's okay. You can spend the night here and I'll take a look at your car in the morning." I continued to back up. "No, it's okay, sir. We really don't need any help." For a brief second, I saw a flash of agitation cross the man's face before he returned to that creepy half-smile of his. "Honestly, it's no trouble. Come on in. I promise I won't hurt you or anything." At this point, Will stepped out of the side of the porch into view. "It's okay," he said. "We really don't need any help." The guy seemed a little surprised that there were two of us, but not really disappointed. But I think with the increase in numbers and Will's "don't fuck with us" tone, the guy slithered back into his house, not saying another word. Quickening our pace, Will and I got out of there. We saw the car with our actives and it passed by twice more before we found an evergreen tree, which was good because I knew that you could make tea from its branches. Having finally found our raw ingredients, our spirits were raised, and we began to forget about that guy. That is until we saw headlights up in front of us. Now, we initially assumed that it was our actives again, but it came far too soon after their last pass, so there was no way they could have come around that fast. Additionally, the car that our actives were in had one of its headlights burned out, and this one's had both of them working fine. We didn't really think too much of it at first, as we did see the occasional person just driving down the road. What tipped us off that something weird was happening was when the car cut cross, stopping right in front of us, and on the wrong side of the road. There was no way that the message could be misunderstood there. The car door opened, and a man stepped out. We couldn't see who, as his headlights were blinding us, but I could have sworn I heard him laugh. With only a second's hesitation, Will and I ran off the road and into a patch of forest to our right. We tried to stick together through it, but somewhere or somehow we got separated. I found a bunch of boulders to hide around and waited. I could hear footsteps off in the distance. The voice of the man at the house calling out, "I know you're here, boys," he said. I slowly peeked my head out from behind the rocks and caught the form of that same man about 30 yards away from me, waving a flashlight around and carrying what looked like a shotgun in his hands. I steadily controlled my breathing, being sure not to panic. I knew that the actives would see that we weren't on the road eventually, and then they knew something was up. That's when I started scanning around for Will. I don't know how, but by some miracle, I saw the form of what could have been Will hiding behind some brush. I began to worry because I could see that it didn't provide him enough cover, and the man was slowly getting closer to him. It was only a matter of time before he got caught. I began to go through scenarios in my head, imagining that if he caught Will, I'd try and jump him from behind, maybe get that shotgun away from him before he could do anything, and the two of us could easily overpower him. I wanted to do that, but I knew it would never work out. By complete accident, I moved my hand around and felt something that gave me an even better idea. I felt a rock, a good heavy size, one slightly bigger than a baseball. I picked up the thing, and with all my strength heaved it a good way off in the distance. The rock made quite a bit of noise, clearly audible through the woods. The man laughed in a maniacal, crazy way that I'll never forget, almost like a grown man, trying to imitate the high-pitched, squealing laughter of young and excited kids. Once he was a good ways off, I came up from my cover and moved towards Will. I got probably halfway to him before he saw me. I made a motion for him to follow, and he did without hesitation. The guy must have thought he was chasing us deeper in, which was damn convenient, because we didn't seem to be in any danger after that. We found the guy's car on the road still, the driver's side door still open. I looked inside but cursed when I saw that he was smart enough to take his keys. Then I looked in the back seat, and a massive lump formed in my throat. Back there was a massive hunting knife and a bunch of duct tape, making sure that the guy both couldn't follow us, and so we had a weapon just in case he could. I grabbed the hunting knife and proceeded to slash the man's tires deeply. We made our way down the way we were supposed to, in order to put some distance between us and the lunatic, making sure to stay off the road. Eventually, we saw the distinct single headlight of our active's car. We ran out in the middle of the road, frantically waving our arms like madmen, not letting him pass us. He stopped and got out, clearly worried. We rushed the car and told him to let us in, and we explained it. He obliged and continued driving, and we explained everything to him. It was made all the more believable when we showed him the knife and passed by the car's car, which was still blocking one side of the road. I'd like to say that I don't blame the frat. They had no way of knowing this would happen, and even afterwards, they did not take this lightly. They admitted to the college what they did, and they helped us through the process of trying to catch the man, which the police eventually did. They found that he had multiple charges of kidnap, assault, and rape on his background. We and the fraternity didn't get into too much trouble, although they did have to promise never to do that ritual ever again after that incident. This incident has and will make me forever more cautious around complete strangers. You don't forget about incidences like this, and I still have nightmares about it sometimes. Nightmares where the guy succeeds in catching us. So, to the creepy bastard who tried to kidnap and possibly rape and kill us, let's not ever meet, and I'm glad that you're rotting away in prison. The Naked Gunman. I go to a big state school in the Midwest with a fairly large Greek life. This story comes up from one of my sorority sisters, Ashley, who encountered a now infamous creep on our campus. It was the fall semester of her junior year, and we were paired that night with, let's call, Alpha Beta Delta fraternity. All of the 21 plus juniors generally drink at the bars rather than the fraternity houses, and we have a nice thing called pledge rides that help make this happen. Basically, first semester fraternity pledges are required to drive for other brothers and girls partying with those brothers 1 or 2 times per week. It's not considered hazing, and is very much accepted by the university as a safe way to prevent possible drunk driving incidences. After a night out at the bars, Ashley and one of the frat boys, Sam, decide to call a pledge ride to bring them home around 2 a.m. in the morning. They wait outside the bar for the guy to pick them up, and pretty soon, a car matching the description of the pledge ride comes up. Ashley approaches the window of the car and asks the driver, "Are you driving for ABD fraternity?" He responds that yes, he was, so Ashley and Sam got in the car. Sam mentioned to Ashley that he didn't recognize the driver, but the fraternity had been very recently given out bids to the new pledge class, so he figured that he hadn't met this guy yet. It became very clear after only a couple minutes in the car that something was off. The driver acted very strange, avoided questions from Sam and the new fraternity pledge class, and started getting hostile. However, he did drive Ashley back to the sorority house. At this point, she was freaked out and knew that they definitely did not get in the car with a pledge. She told Sam to call her as soon as he made it back to the frat and hesitantly got out of the car. Sam called soon after and was out of breath. After they dropped Ashley off, the driver became more and more hostile. Sam asked the guy what he wanted, if he wanted money or what. The guy was talking nonsense when Sam noticed his hand resting over something between the driver's seat and the center console. A gun! As soon as the car came to a stop sign, Sam jumped out and booked it. He called Ashley to tell her that he was walking and running home, that he was fine, and that the creep drove off. They rode off as some sketchy guy most likely looking for money or drugs or both. Fast forward to the end of spring semester that same year. About a week after the school year ended, my friend Allie sent me an Imgur link and said, "You have to see this." Back at campus, a guy had been arrested that morning for shooting a gun and threatening a cop. This guy came outside wearing nothing but a trucker hat, waving a gun around, and shooting at random houses. The cop had to shoot him in the leg to subdue him at that moment, and he subsequently arrested one of Allie's friends who lived right next to where the shooting happened and was still on campus for the summer, snapped a pic of the guy from her bedroom, and it made it to the front page. I soon heard, through the sorority grapevine, that it was the same guy that Ashley encountered in the pledge ride. Apparently, he was a student at the university, and another one of my sisters had been in a class with him at one point. She said he was very, very strange. The frat party. The college I attended is party school, and being the homebody freshman I thought I was, I never really attended any of the parties that would ensue. When I met my then crush now fiance that year, she was a total party girl, with the intention of going to every party she could get into. Mostly I tagged along because I wanted to spend time with her to get her to have the same feelings for me. The first party we go to was one she had gotten invited to because she had caught this frat boy's attention. He invited her to his apartment, and naturally, she brought me and some of our mutual friends along. When we got there, it was obvious we were the youngest ones there, and most of the other students looked in their early 20s. My fiancé instantly started drinking after the frat gave her the go. 2 drinks in and she's wasted. She was a huge lightweight and refused to stop drinking. At this point, I made my way over to the beer pong table and was playing games with some of the other partygoers. The frat comes up to me and tells me that my girl is making a ruckus and I need to take her to his room and calm her down. So I take my fiance to the room and try to calm her down. Of course, she doesn't want to be in there because she wants to go back out and party. Not too long after, the frat comes in and sees me in there with her. She looks at me and says with a straight face, "Why are you in here?" I told him I did what he said and took her in to calm her down. He then told me, "No, I said to leave her in here to calm down. You don't have to be in here. I've got her, don't worry." From that moment, even my drunk fiance knew what was going on. She begged me not to leave her with him because she was scared. He kept telling me that she would be alright and that he would take care of her. I didn't buy that one bit and I stood my ground. I told him I wasn't leaving, so if he wanted to take care of her, I would be here to stay. He got angry with me and started to show agitated body movements while cursing at me to leave her there. He was a small guy, and there was 100% I could punch him out and get her out of there, but I didn't want to cause a scene and the police called. Thankfully, after a few minutes of being away, another one of our friends appeared, and the guy backed off due to being outnumbered. We left, and thankfully saved my fiancé from what could have been a horrifying night. Never underestimate the kindness of strangers. This incident took place back in 2008. I was about halfway through my first year of college and decided that pledging a fraternity would be a good way to meet new people. Turns out I was right. The kids I met during this time are still my best friends today and actually stood in my wedding. But the story isn't about them. It's about an alumni that frequented many of our close initiations during pledging and lived in the college town since graduating 4 years earlier. As a little background information, I grew up in a small private school, graduating class of 18, and had very few friends throughout high school. In general, I am and still am rather shy. I was raised to give people the benefits of the doubts, trust people until they give you a reason not to, never underestimate the kindness of strangers, etc. Basically, I have been taken advantage from time to time because I am overtly trusting of others. Now, pledging is different at every college and university, and there are different thresholds of what you can and cannot get away with. Going to a small school and not being a national chapter, we were able to do just about anything we wanted. I don't necessarily condone a lot of it, and I was fortunate to pledge a fraternity that cared more about bringing the people closer together than making them puke from doing sit-ups and beer pongs. The night of which the story takes place as one of the more mentally challenging nights. We were blindfolded at 4 p.m. and made to stand in a small room in our fraternity house for hours with a particularly unpleasant song playing on loop and offset multiple times by multiple speakers. One by one, we would get pulled out of the group and grilled for about a half hour and sent back to wallow in shame for not knowing things like the middle name of a fraternity member who graduated in 1986. A little ridiculous looking back on it now, but it was really important back then, and it really brought us together, as silly as that sounds. I was one of the last to go and finished around 2:30 a.m. Before the night began, I had told my pledge master that I needed to leave before the night was over because I was volunteering for a charity event early the next morning, as this was taking place in the basement of a small dingy fraternity house. I was being led back up the stairs from where I came, but instead of being led back to my group, I was pulled in a direction that led outside, as I could tell from the cold night air. I still have my blindfold on, and am waiting for something to happen when my pledge master rips it off of me and continues the verbal dismantling. Standing behind him is one of the other assistant pledge masters and an alumni who I only know as Dave. As I mentioned, Dave graduated a few years before, about 25, 26 years old, and never really left the area to find work. He showed up back at the fraternity house during events like this one, in which I am describing, and had an uneasy way of overstaying his welcome. Outside of this, I really did not know him and had no reason to cast him in a negative light for being awkward at times and not wanting to give up on his glory days. Once my pledge master ran out of things to berate me, he told me to get going so I can get some sleep before my volunteering. As the event was still going on in the house, the pledge master and assistant pledge master returned to the house and I was left to stand outside with Dave, feeling pretty low. Hey man, try not to worry about it much either. Everyone has problems with these nights, Dave said. I told him I wasn't too beaten up by it, and I understand most of it is for show. So, what's this thing you got going on tomorrow? Dave, asking to try to move on from the nights. Oh, nothing crazy. Just a school-sponsored charity event. My mom has a disease, so it's been something I've done for years, I told him, thinking he was just trying to make small talk. That's taking place right next to the activity center on the west side of campus, right? I live right across the street, Dave says. This is where my ignorance and trusting behavior got me in trouble. You only have a couple hours until it starts. Why don't you crash at my place, and I'll wake you up when we need to go? Dave insists while motioning to his car at the end of the driveway. Now, in my mind, my pledge master knows this guy and trusts this guy at our very private events and trusts him enough to leave me with him. Why the heck shouldn't he? We're all fraternity brothers, and part of that bond is helping one another in times of need, or at least that's what I'm thinking. I hesitantly agreed for two reasons. My apartment was a 25-minute walk away, and he had a car. The activity center was about another 15-minute walk away from my apartment. This would save me a lot of time and energy after a pretty tiring night. He begins leading me to his car, making small talk about what he experienced during pledging and how it's not easy on anyone. After a short 5-minute car ride, we pull up to a small ranch house that is literally across the street from the activity center. He wasn't lying. This is working out great, and I even have some time to get some shut-eye. Again, in my mind, this dude is looking out for a future bro and just being nice to someone in need. See how trusting I am of strangers? He opens his front door, and it is incredibly dark. We walk into his family and living room, and I notice he only has a couple of lazy boy type chairs in front of an old box TV. Okay, guess I'm not sleeping on a couch. He continues to lead me through the living room, past a small kitchen, and mentions that this is a 2-bedroom house, so I can sleep in the guest. Perfect. We get into the room, and he slowly opens the door and flips on a light. As I walk around him and begin to enter the room, I see something that makes me question what I just got myself into. On the small twin bed, in the middle of the room, are a small pair of shorts and a small t-shirt, laid out like you would for a child getting dressed in the morning. They were old high school wrestling gym clothes, clearly worn and neatly displayed on the bed. I got some clothes laid out for you to wear, so you can get out your pledging stuff, he says, without skipping a beat. It had a tone that made it sound like it was meant to cover up the uncomfortable situation, but was made as more of a demand than an offer. I said sure thing and closed the door behind me. Of course there's no lock, because why would there be, in a creepy house with a creepy guy who wants me to wear his old clothes that are way too small for me? For about 2 to 3 minutes, I just stand there, staring at the clothes, thinking, why would these already be put out if he didn't know I or anyone was going to be needing a place to sleep? Why was he still at the pledging event when no other alumni stayed past midnight and opted for the bars instead? Just as I am slowly beginning to freak out, I realize I have my phone on me again. During pledging, we have to hand in our phones, and during this time I rarely had it on me. I powered it back up, and before the screen is even warmed up, buzz, 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 buzz. I had about text messages from my pledge master, both assistant pledge masters, and some of my fraternity members, along with a few missed calls peppered in chronological order as best as I can remember. Hey, where are you? Did you already leave? Did you leave with Dave? You're not with Dave, are you? Text me or call me ASAP. If you're with Dave, you need to get the fuck out of there. So here I am, in a man's guest bedroom, staring at his old childhood clothes he wants me to wear, behind a door that doesn't lock, with a phone blowing up with people telling me I need to get away from this guy, who I willingly let me take to his house. I stood there for a few minutes waiting for my heart to stop pounding and to figure out my next move. I don't know if this was the smartest or best move in the whole world, but I decided to exit as quickly and nonchalantly as possible. Opening the door, I would have to walk past the kitchen and family room to get to the front. What I noticed was again, there was no light in the house, not even coming from the other bedroom, where I would have assumed he would be. I began walking past the kitchen when I saw him out of the corner of my eye. I think I startled him as much as he startled me. He was leaning up against the refrigerator that was facing away from the hallway I was walking down. He didn't have anything in his hands that would make sense to be in the kitchen, and didn't look like he was doing anything other than waiting in that spot. Before he could get a word out, I flipped my phone open. Yes, a flip phone. It was 2008, and in stride said, "You know what? I forgot I need to do some paperwork for tomorrow morning that's still in my apartment. I appreciate your help, though," and power walked and jogged out of the house. It all happened so quickly, I don't even think I gave him a chance to react after initially alarming him. In the next 4 years, I never saw him return to the fraternity house or any other function. However, this isn't to say we didn't hear from him again. It turns out, he is more unstable than I initially thought, and was arrested multiple times for cornering women in public and exposing himself. After my incident with him, I was told numerous stories from other older fraternity members that alluded to him being predatory by nature, never with a young fraternity member, but has enough of a history that he had eyes kept on him at all times when he was around fraternity functions. I still like to believe people are genuinely good in this world, and I have no problem underestimating the kindness of strangers, but because of this little life lesson, I am much more critical in these situations.